All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a discussion about affordable housing brought to you by the Athens area Democratic Socialists of America and Athens for Everyone. I'm Erin Stacer, and today we are joined by Commissioner of Athens District 2, Mariah Parker. Thanks so much for being here, Mariah.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Deeply appreciate you.
Yeah.
So I think we'll kick off today's discussion mostly just talking first about like what our housing situation is, what it looks like, and kind of maybe that will move us into how it got to be this way. And then we can kind of move into solutions. And also I'll say for anybody who's watching, feel free to make a comment. And we might be able to throw that up on the screen and Mariah can answer your questions and hopefully we'll get a good dialogue going. So Mariah, yeah, you want to tell us
where we're at and why?
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, let's dig in. So I first want to put things into the context of the situation happening across the state. Because while we here as, working class Athenians may be feeling housing pressures with regards to rent or struggles to get a mortgage because of our employment history, income level, etc., Athens actually has a lower rent than the average across the state of Georgia. And I bring this up because I want to, as a member of DSA and knowing that labor issues are very important to the organization, highlight the link between housing and labor justice, in that we have really low rents, but we have really low wages in Athens. 38% poverty, about 30% of people are working. So there's, 30% of people in Athens who are working full time and still not being able to make ends meet. And so I'm just going to stick a little pin in that because I think that is an important part of why housing is becoming so unaffordable to the people of Athens and some Athens specific issues outside of this cost of housing alone that is driving that. But one thing that I think is really driving the housing situation in Athens is the expansion of the University of Georgia. They are expanding their enrollment by tens of thousands over the next decade or so, while not offering any housing opportunities for that influx of students who are then very much influencing the housing market. So with the Georgia Hope Scholarship, not having any kind of income cap, we have a very high, family income levels for people students who attended the University of Georgia, some of the highest of any public university in the country. And so wanting to capitalize on that market, a lot of housing developers are developing multifamily housing that is in this luxury bracket, knowing that people are coming into Athens, not having to pay for tuition. And so their mommies and daddies are putting money that might have squirreled away for tuition into $1,000 a month bedroom with an infinity pool on the roof of their apartment complex. We're also seeing that translate into pressures in in-town neighborhoods. So traditionally Black, brown, working class neighborhoods like East Athens, where I represent, housing that was traditionally meant for single families is being flipped into student rentals because, again, people can make a lot more money off students than they can off of me and you, working multiple jobs, trying to keep a roof over our heads. With that, we do have somewhat of a housing shortage in Athens, not just for affordable housing, but for people in the middle income brackets as well. So for people making 60 to 120% of the area median income, anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 a year, there's not even housing being built for those folks. It's mostly for students, or a lot of the single family housing we're seeing crop up is in the $400,000, $500,000 range for people of extreme means. And so this issue is pushing middle class and lower middle class folks into traditionally Black and low income neighborhoods, because that's the only place that people can find housing. And so that is then, that coupled with the student housing problem is forcing a lot of lower income Black and brown residents out of the county or further condensed into neighborhoods that it's perpetuating segregation in a certain sense. I've actually heard the road from Clark County to Oglethorpe described as the Trail of Tears because of the numbers of Black people that are being displaced, being pushed out. And frankly, for our elders, folks that are capitalizing on the housing rising housing costs to, avoid paying higher property taxes, get some money by selling out their family home to a developer, moving somewhere cheaper like Oglethorpe, and then that house then becomes a student rental or sold again for twice as much, etc. Another thing I want to highlight really quickly is the amount of multifamily housing that's coming down the pipe in Athens. The planning department has said that we have about 11,000 apartment units either coming through the planning process or with construction permits pulled for Athens in the coming years. And density is something that we want to encourage because it helps us connect more people to public transit, to sidewalks, to amenities, and creates a sense of community when there's more people living together. And so that's an area where we'll talk a little bit more about this later, can use our leverage with our existing zoning, with the incentives that developers feel they have for getting density bonuses to really exploit, how much density they can get out of a property to try to get some affordable housing in there. But that is the reality of Athens right now. We're seeing a lot of apartment complexes developed. We're seeing a lot of pressure on low income and traditionally Black and brown neighborhoods. We're seeing, and both from students and from middle class folks that are also unable to find housing that is affordable for the income they make.
Okay, thanks. Wow, that was very thorough. Thank you. I saw a question pop up from someone, I think, who was asking about there you go. From Brandon Rogers, who's asking, is the average heavily skewed by Atlanta? And I would
imagine so, yeah. And several, I guess Athens is the 5th most populous city in the state. And so other cities like Augusta, Savannah, Macon, probably big metropolitan areas are probably also skewing those numbers higher, whereas the rest of Georgia probably has lower rents than we do.
Very true. And we're a college town, and like you brought up, so the apartment complexes that we have here being often heavily geared towards students. Why do we see that right now? Like, why? I know so many people talk about this in Athens, just about how hard it is to find an apartment that's not in an apartment complex that is clearly like they rent by the room, right? Mm-hmm. And your neighbors, like even if you were a working class person, you would be surrounded by students.
Yeah. And so, I mean, our housing market, the realities of our housing market are heavily skewed by the reality that so many students come to Athens with seemingly unlimited income. They're not tethered by, what they can make at, working at Nedza's or something like that. Or if they're making money on the side, their parents are paying their rent for them. And so that's money for them to, go to Jersey's and get blacked out drunk. And so why would you, what is the profit motive then for developers? Why would you rent out an apartment for $400 a month when you could easily rent that same quality apartment for $800 to a student that doesn't know any better about what the realities of the housing market in Athens is? As well, it incentivizes them to throw in a ton of amenities, pools, gyms, study rooms, game rooms, all kinds of things like that, so that students who come from very affluent families will pay even more. And so I do think it also comes down to the way that the University of Georgia exploits the people of Athens. So many problems from income inequality to our housing crisis are perpetuated by them because they put those problems on us. So, we're going to increase enrollment by 10,000, 20,000 students over the next decade or two without building any more dorms. Questions like that, where then it falls upon the unified government for us to figure out, where are we going to put the students? Do we want the students, like you were saying, as a working class person living next door to you playing beer pong, right over the fence? Or do we use some sort of density bonus to put a complex of student housing someplace, but sneak some affordable units in there too, as a way of expanding our affordable housing stock, but addressing the realities that students are taking over our working class neighborhoods. Right. And so it is very much driven by the University of Georgia, but it's also driven by capitalist greed as well.
Right. Yeah. There's all that market incentive. Andrea is asking a question. Can you talk about the relationship between jobs and housing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned this a little bit on the intro, but I'll kind of come back to some of my thoughts around that. I mentioned at the top that Georgia actually, excuse me, Athens actually has some of the lowest or lower than average rent rates for the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
We also have higher than average working poverty. We got 30% of people here who are working full time but still not being able to make ends meet.
They got jobs.
Yeah,
jobs.
We have jobs, but they're predominantly in the service sector. People that are our highest employers, the University of Georgia. Once again, tying it back to the way that they offload their problems onto the unified government to solve, and us as year-round Athenians to deal with. And so to take a quick detour from the topic of housing specifically, another thing that's really important to me is revamping the way we think about economic development in the city, attracting jobs that not only have a high, attracting companies that not only have a high median wage, but have a high wage floor, so that, it doesn't matter if someone at the top is making $100,000, if a janitor is still making 9 or 10. We want to see everyone at least come in the door at 15 as a way to alleviate those issues of working poverty, such that then folks can go out and find housing that's affordable to them because they're making more money. I also think that the unified government needs to be more proactive in supporting labor in the city, getting behind the service industry union around the United Campus Workers of Georgia, and supporting our own employees and unionizing and being responsive to their demands, so that we see an increase in wages, we see an increase in job security, things like that, so that folks that are making tips, working at Walkers, et cetera, again, can bring home more money so that they can keep a roof over their heads and perhaps are less reliant upon government intervention for us to solve the crisis of affordable housing.
Thank you. Yeah, that made me think about, obviously with UGA, it seems a lot more difficult, but when we think about what leverage we have, or what leverage the unified government has in order to try and solve the problem of affordable housing. You have
a second piece to that. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, go ahead. You say.
Yeah, there's actually a second piece to that I could touch on that also ties into one of the mechanisms we can use to create more affordable housing in Athens. So we last year approved these things called tax allocation districts, in which essentially all the new property tax generated in a certain area gets funneled back into that area. So let's say someone builds a bunch of $400,000 houses that new property tax has generated, can then be used to build more affordable housing. So let's say that generates $100,000, $200,000 in property tax. We can reinvest that into getting some units in an apartment complex that are affordable, or maybe even some single family housing as well. But an issue that ties into labor with this idea of tax allocation districts is that each tax allocation district comes with an advisory committee that decides what kind of community benefits they want to get out of particularly projects with developers where they're requesting zoning variances from the city, et cetera, or asking for some tax allocation district money to help fund their projects, like a public-private partnership. And so some of the community benefits that could be negotiated are labor standards. So we want to make sure that people who are working on installing the solar panels, or building the swimming pool, or doing maintenance on the lawn, are getting paid a living wage. And so that's another way where we actually use the construction of new housing to address the labor injustices in our community.
That's awesome. How do people get on those committees?
They're actually appointed by the mayor. And so the first one, that's actually my district, Lexington Road, TAD, has been appointed, is assembled or comprised of some residents, some business owners, and just folks that live or work in that area. And they will they'll start looking at community benefits agreements for projects that get proposed for the area, et cetera. But if you're interested in being on one, find out if you're in one and get in touch with the mayor, because he hasn't appointed all of them yet. And even if you're I don't really have time to be all up in it like that, you could also just tune into their meetings, get in touch with the folks who are on it, and provide your input, because we see this as a way to really democratize the decision making around what our communities develop into.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. To be able to have more community input is exactly what we need. I want to circle back to the idea of leverage, but I'm sure we'll get there. We have another question.
Yeah, I brought up unions, and now all those socialists are super stoked. It's like, I'm stoked too. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, for real. On the topic at hand, what does the county commission supporting unions look like? I mean, to be frank, I'm still working through this myself and would love to take recommendations from folks who are involved with labor. But my initial ideas include issuing resolutions in support of workers' demands that have organized around their workplace. I think that looks like municipal policies that meet the demands. So, for example, if the service industry union organizes and decides that they want paid sick leave, that's something that other cities have passed. And so, working with them and working with people like the Social Bill of Rights Coalition, Richard Winfield, and all those folks to figure out what municipal policy we can pass around that. I think it was Austin, Texas, passed laws around mandatory scheduling advance notice, because a lot of folks, if you work in the service industry, like you get your schedule a week before you have to work it. How are you supposed to make a doctor's appointment for your kid or show up to the PTA conference? And so, meeting the demands of organized labor through municipal policy where we can, issuing resolutions in support of them to raise awareness of those issues and put pressure on business owners to get those things done. Are some of the ideas I've had so far. But I as a commissioner, want to be very responsive to labor. And so if people have other ideas on how the commission can be supportive, I would love to hear from them from you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Circling back, unless anyone else has other questions that pop up, circling back to leverage and what you have, what the unified government can do as far as working with both. You have UGA and you have developers, which seem to be the two greatest forces affecting our affordable housing right now. And so I saw, at least like you recently kind of maneuvered a deal like with some development that was happening in your district, and had one of these large complexes that was going to be built, right? Like the developers can build anyway. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the tricks of it. Like they can build by right. Mm-hmm. But you had them. Well, tell us what you.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that process, and as well what's coming next down the road with regards to those processes. Because right now they are informal. Right now, what I do is I meet when I hear a large-scale multifamily development is coming down the pipe in my district. I go to developers and say, "Hey, look, you want to squeeze in a couple more units of market rate housing here in exchange for a couple of units of affordable housing there. Everybody wins. Y'all get to make a little bit more money, and then working class people in Athens have a place that they can live." And so in this particular example, in addition to some other amenities, a stoplight, walking trails, community garden, some environmental protections and sustainability considerations, we were able to negotiate 60 apartments for workforce housing for people making between 60 and 120 of the area median income, and the option to get an additional 60 units, so potential total of 120 apartments for working class folks as a part of a complex that is otherwise market rate or very likely to be marketed towards students. And so that happens on a very ad hoc basis. A lot of commissioners, frankly, just don't do it. And I understand why. It's like, oh, shady backroom deals with developers, et cetera. But it's like, if they're going to plop something down in your district anyway, the reality is that we live in a capitalism. Like, they're going to be able to do whatever they want to do, and they have a profit motive. So while y'all out here in the streets trying to make a change and, bring about a world where housing is no longer a commodity, I'm going to do my little part in the interim, trying to get affordable housing for the people out of these projects that are probably inevitable for the areas where they're being proposed. So because it kind of sucks that as an ad hoc process, like some commissioners do it, some commissioners don't, it's kind of weird. The mayor has appointed an inclusionary zoning working group, of which I and Commissioner Tim Denson are part, to formalize our expectations around these processes. So how do we define affordable housing? What is affordable? How much density, how much of a density bonus, how many extra units of market rate housing are we willing to trade for affordable housing? Who's going to do the oversight? How are we going to ensure that the units of affordable housing that are promised remain affordable? Who's going to do the oversight for those processes? working out all those questions. So we have actual policies on the books. So rather than coming to me or me going to them, they can go to the books and say like, oh, okay, in Athens, Carr County, if you build this and add, 10 units of market rate housing, or you can add 10 units of market rate housing if you also include, 10 of affordable housing. And they actually bring us fully formulated plans that meet our expectations with regards to how much affordable housing we'd like to see in these multifamily, in these big apartment complexes, since those are a lot of what is getting built these days. So very excited about the work of the inclusionary zoning working group to actually get these policies on the books so that folks like myself don't have to run around chasing after these like hedge fund dudes being like, hey, yo, like, what about the nurses? What about the teachers? What about janitors? Like, where are we gonna live at? Like, over here? Can we put it over here in this thing building? Yeah, I'm very excited about that work.
That's awesome. This particular unit that I was thinking of it was going to be mostly student housing. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, and the complex thing about dealing with the affordable housing crisis is also acknowledging that students are going to live somewhere, right?
It's got to be somewhere.
They're going to live next to you over on Atlanta Avenue, or they're going to come live next to me over on Hillside Street. Or we can just kind of like put them all in like a apartment together where they can like play beach volleyball and like play walk the flame real loud and like wake up on the sidewalk one morning, like, how did I get here? And like do their little thing like together, and it'll be great. Freeing up more of the single family housing in neighborhoods like where Aaron lives, where I live, for families, for working people. And so like there's this demonization of student housing that I like totally get in and behind, but thinking strategically about how we make allowances for it in ways that preserve traditionally working class neighborhoods is a battle that we are in right now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, there's a question. Thanks, Mac. Does ACC have the sewer capacity and zoning capacity to accommodate the 30,000 additional people we expect in the next 25 years or so?
That's a great question, and I cannot answer that for the county as a whole. But with regards to my district specifically and our anticipated increase in population in East Athens, where I know Mac lives, we do foresee we have the capacity for the expansion that we see at least in the next 10 years or so, 25 years at. I'm sure projections have been done by like folks at Central Services and Public Utilities, but those aren't conversations that most recently we've had on the commission, I believe. But I have inquired about my district at least. I can't speak for the county as a whole.
We have another one. Your description of that housing sounds a lot like dorms. Yeah.
Right? You know what's really funny? I saw this cool tweet yesterday. Paul's laughing at me because maybe he knows the one. Where someone was like, people talk about college like it was the best time of their life because it was the last time they lived in a walkable, bikeable area with all of their friends, with lots of loft time for leisure. And it's like, why don't we just make cities like that? I mean, like, sure, there's other, partying, et cetera, that like make people happy about college life. And I was miserable in college, so I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I did get to walk everywhere and live close to my friends and like, have time for extracurriculars. And so, yeah, it totally does sound like dorms. And that's the interesting thing is that even if we put it upon the University of Georgia to deal with the student housing, the needs and the influx in population that we are seeing in that demographic, they got to put it somewhere, right? And so, like, do we want to trust them to go about deciding, where, what of our neighborhoods they want to put housing in, or actual elected they put it in the hands of people who are elected by the public to help shape those discussions. But yeah, no, it does sound like these kids need dorms. They do, and like whether it falls upon the University of Georgia or falls upon us negotiating with private developers, like these things, like they're gonna live somewhere, and they're probably gonna live next to Aaron if we don't do anything.
They already are.
Aaron, yeah, we failed you, Aaron.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, with UGA too. I mean, I'd rather have this in the hands of people who are accountable to the people that live here far more than UGA is. Now, I hope that UGA could work with us more. I'm curious to what degree they do?
Create an affordable housing fund. It'd be great of like, hey, we understand the pressures on the housing market that like our existence in your city and like our demographics are creating, like, you know, here's $4 million to like address that, you know. But that's a whole other thing about like pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, et cetera, and like the need for them to pay.
Andrea brings up the very point I was thinking of exactly when you said about building.
Oh, yes. Andrea brings up the excellent part. We've already seen how UGA deals with dorm problems. Lennon-town doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, we'll just take your neighborhood.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. So we've kind of gone through some as far as like how you can leverage with developers, some of the difficulties, and looking forward to maybe working with UGA with their incoming influx of kids. I was also talking about zoning, and in what ways do you guys get to use zoning in a progressive way that can help us with affordable housing?
Yeah, we can use zoning. We can change our zoning code such that we incentivize, or I guess I could say we structure the parameters of what you can build in a way that pushes towards like single family, low to moderate income housing in certain neighborhoods where it fits the character. We can also use zoning to maybe some areas need to get upzoned so that, you know, if it's close to a bunch of bike lanes and bus routes and parks, and we want a lot of people to be able to utilize those things, then we might encourage increased density there so more people can take advantage of those things without having to rely on a car. And so those are two areas. We have had some recommendations in both directions from the Planning Commission that we are expected to work through and decide on approving in the next couple of months, because we recognize that, for example, once again, in the peri-urban core of East Athens, the zoning is like people are taking the quote unquote cheap land, but the way it's zoned, they can build a $400,000 house on it that's got like 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, whatever. And so thinking about, all right, well, if we want to see things stay in the character of the neighborhood, how can we, you know, change the parameters, change the constraints such that we're encouraging or only allowing more housing that fits like what a working family might need.
Right, exactly. Andrew says, can you talk about the Planning Commission and their role? How do we get them on board more, because they make a lot of decisions about zoning and housing?
So the question, I'll go ahead and say the question of how do we get them on board. If you want to drop some elaboration, Andrea, maybe I can address that, but they speak to studies that have been done. They speak to the history of areas, the architecture of areas, and how to keep things within in the character of certain neighborhoods, as well as considerations of like traffic management, traffic engineering, traffic flow, how additional density impacts the flow of traffic in areas like that, and you know, just like whether or not something fits in or like it should go somewhere based on our existing zoning codes, the studies that have been done, and impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. And so there was a second part to Andrew's question that I don't remember.
Can you flash that back?
So she said, what do they do? How do we get them on board? Well, you try to become a planning commissioner. The mayor and commission interviews and appoints planning commissioners every 2 to 4 years, and so that is a body someone can serve on to bring a progressive lens to the decisions that they make. Their meetings are also open to public comment, and so you can go to their planning commission meetings or submit your feedback to the Plan Commission on things that are being proposed in order to have that influence the decisions that they make. So those are two ways that you can get involved. We can get them on board, I guess you could say, with a more progressive agenda for the way that we zone and the way we house folks.
Awesome. That's pretty thorough there. We're coming up right at about 30 minutes. How you feeling, Mariah?
Feel great. It's always great hanging out there at Stacer.
Hey.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone else...
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked mostly about like affordable housing as like a working class, middle class issue. But like, I think it's really important to also draw attention to folks who have like no income. Like a lot of the folks that are like living on the street right now, the increased housing precarity we've seen under the pandemic, with this very loophole-ridden CDC eviction moratorium, I think about to expire at the end of March anyway. Failure of the federal government to cancel rent mortgages, and the ways that, and then the unseen the houselessness. We like. I think I'm starting to believe that homelessness is such a like marquee issue because middle class people are complaining about the homeless, of like, oh, they're camping in my backyard, oh, they're like peeing behind my business, there's like, they're just hanging out in the streets, but like without recognizing the humanity of like, everyone deserves a roof over their head. Housing is a human right. We need to deal with it because like these are people who are hurting. And so thinking about affordable housing also, how do we get people stably housed that don't have it right now? Right. And one of the things the commission is working on is, we just actually got out of a budget meeting, and many of us expressed interest in increasing the operational funding for the Athens area homeless shelter. They actually aren't operating at peak capacity right now, despite the fact that we have greater need than ever, just because they didn't have the funding. And so just having a place for people to stay at night. But studies from other cities, Vancouver and others, have found that permanent supportive housing is the best way to, in the long run, cut down on your expenditures around homelessness, and also keep people off the streets and keep them, get people gainfully employed, getting educated, getting off drugs, getting help with mental health issues. And so one of the things we're planning on doing, both through SPLOST funds and perhaps expanding this program through the American Rescue Plan funding that's coming in like 2 months, is buying apartments, buying hotels that people can live in, no strings attached, with wraparound services, rides to doctor's appointments, help getting your GED classes done, et cetera, so that folks can become stably housed long-term and gain the kind of stability that then enables them to find housing of their own and enter the free market housing market. I don't know if that's the real phrase. And then I think Tim Denson is coming on here tomorrow, so he'll talk more about this
on Sunday.
Another program I'm really excited about that he has not pioneered, but he's championed for Athens Park County, and I've been really enthusiastic about supporting him on, is Project Reset, which is modeled after a project that has taken place in Gwinnett, where someone's facing eviction. They can come to the magistrate court with their landlord and get a settlement where, like, for negotiated lower back rent payout to the landlord, the tenant gets to stay housed. And so they resolve the back rent issue and avoid eviction by saying, hey, if the government will pay y'all the X amount that you are owed, can these people stay living here? And so that way of keeping people stably housed that are on the brink of homelessness might end up couch surfing or living in an extended stay hotel, keeping a roof over their head. And so there's like affordable housing as like this perpetual issue that's like ongoing. And then there's like the housing emergency that we are facing under the pandemic right now. Right. And so I just wanted to also speak to that, since I don't want to forget, I never want to forget those folks. Those folks maybe even need our help more than like the middle and working class people that are like, my rent went up. It's like, oh, you got a house though. Like, so.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. The people now who are suffering the most have also been the people who have been suffering long before this pandemic and the several crises that have come out of it. Yeah. So thanks for highlighting that. There was another question that popped up, I think, about immigrant populations. What was that? In what way can we get help to our undocumented families, low-income families? Rent has gone up to the point that people are moving out of the state.
Well, one thing we can definitely do as a city, I think, is expand the stock of affordable housing, so that when people are getting displaced from what tends to be a lot of times, with the people in my district that are getting displaced from the Hallmark trailer community, this is substandard housing in the first place. Like, these aren't good places to live. Yes, there's community there that's really important. The social fabric of those neighborhoods is a beautiful thing, but we want people living in good housing. And if we want to if we can't trust private developers to develop quality housing at a cost where anyone can afford, I think it's on us as a government to take up the mantle and make sure that happens. And so a couple of ways we can do that is through leftover SPLOST funding for affordable housing. I think about $39 million of that got spent on the Bethel redevelopment project, which in itself is going to add hundreds and hundreds of units of deeply affordable housing right next to the heart of downtown. But building more single-family housing in neighborhoods like East Athens, where we have a lot of abandoned houses, and using the Land Bank Authority to resolve like property tax issues. Like those houses get abandoned a lot of times because like, I'm going on a tangent. I promise I'm coming back though. Those houses get abandoned a lot of times because like somebody's granddad died and now they have 17 grandchildren who all technically own the house and none of them want to pay property tax on it. So they all just like split and then the roof falls in. So using the Land Bank Authority to resolve those inheritance issues, say like, yo, for like less property tax than you owe or none, if you just give the house to the city, y'all are good, and then we can flip that property into place for people that can live. And then as well using tax allocation districts to create more housing effectively for undocumented families, low-income families, to give people an option of somewhere to live in Athens still. I am as having an organizer background, like I'm very supportive of tenants organizing together to push back on slumlords and things like that. Like, oh, yo, rent's going up. How about you don't get any rent? Because like that's the crock of yes, etc. Like, you know, oh, you gotta come fix these issues with the roof leaking and the toilet running and the burners on the stove won't turn on. Just like using whatever like clout I can as commissioner to like help support those efforts. Mm-hmm. But on the policy side of things, infusing our housing market with funds for social housing, such that if we can't totally control what happens in the private housing market, we at least can give people another option so they can stay in Athens if they are getting displaced.
Awesome. Yeah, you brought up kind of the land trust type of thing that we have here. I guess what are kind of the pros and cons of having land trust type programs?
I mean, I think to me, the community land trust model is the most effective way of ensuring perpetual affordability of housing, of saying that, hey, we'll sell you the house, we'll keep the land. So you get to buy the house for less because you're not buying the land, as long as when you sell it, like you can sell it to us first of anybody, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that is a really effective way of keeping housing affordable in perpetuity. Something that's actually brought to my attention recently, or actually, no, I'm not going to go there because I need to do more research on that, and I don't want to speak from a place of being uninformed. So never mind.
I appreciate that.
So your question was something that I need repeated.
So I was asking, what are the pros and cons of land trust type programs?
The cons is that you don't own the land underneath it. And so like you do have to offer the house back to the land trust when you want to sell it. So you aren't getting as much out of it in terms of equity or increased property value when you sell it, because you got to offer it to them first. And you're not benefiting from the increased value of the land, factoring into the total property value that you could benefit from when you sell it to someone. So what we see in East Athens a lot, keep talking about East Athens because I love it over here, but a lot of like older folks who like have, they paid off their mortgage finally, 30 years, somebody comes in and like offers them like a sweet chunk of change for their house. And like, why would they, if someone's offering them like an extra $50K to just like sell it to some real estate agent, as opposed to like, not for, it goes back into the land trust, like from an individualistic perspective, like why they deserve it. They pay their dues, particularly as older African Americans as live in East Athens, like for whom housing, like given what happened with the Federal Housing Administration and redlining, et cetera, like they made that money, boo, like that's theirs. I can't even be mad about people really like doing that and being skeptical of the community land trust model, because they want to be able to gain that generational wealth and benefit from that equity and benefit from that increased property value themselves. So on the one side, a lot of the things that are good about land trust also aren't.
It seems to me, and I still need to do a lot of research, so I may be, totally off here, but it does seem like the land trust idea is kind of a good short-term thing. But when we think about the kind of, like you're talking about, like generational wealth passed down, well, if we were saying mostly African-American people perhaps were to go into the land trust model, then they're not getting to pass it down, whereas white families still continue to do that, right? And so that wealth.
Yeah, there's less accrual of generational wealth through the process of home ownership on an individual level for individual homeowners. Yeah.
So there's not to put down the land trust. It is great to have people having housing.
Yes.
Because they need it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like a long-term fix, I could see the pitfalls there.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I wanted to say again with back to the TADs real quick.
Sure.
About people getting on these committees.
Yes.
Appointed by the mayor.
Yes.
Is this every year that he appoints new people to a committee, or how long are they on there?
I actually think they're for the life of the TAD.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's for a long time. I mean, obviously, you have to step down. You got to step down. It's not like we're going to keep you on there. Like, no, you can't leave. But I believe they are. And the lifespan for the TADs, I think, is like 7, 8, 9 years. So Brandon asked, how competitive are those seats? We actually have, I don't think we have, people barking up the tree to get on them. So if you are interested in being a part of that process and you live in one or you work in one, definitely reach out to the mayor or me, and I'll let you know how to I'll help you figure out if you live in one or if you work in one.
So is that specific? I was thinking, I had in my mind that you would be on a committee who is discussing all the different TADs, but is it one committee per?
It is district specific. So the folks on Lexington Road are discussing Lexington Road. Okay. Folks with the East Downtown one are discussing Eastern Downtown. Folks who live out by the mall discussing the mall, etc. Yeah.
Get on those committees, y'all. We need good people.
We need people on all the committees. We need people on all the committees, all the boards and commissions, all the boards and authorities. I'm really glad that Andrea brought up, how do we get the planning commission on board? Back in the day, we used to ask, how do we get the commission, the mayor and commission on board? And you know what? Now I am one.
You got some folks who ran.
Do it. You get in there, you're at the table making the decisions with people, and that's how you ain't gotta beg for scraps. Oh please, in your emails, etc. Become the person and be making the decisions is the way to do it. So get on all these boards and authorities, man.
Awesome. All right. I think we're looking pretty good. Are there any other questions from our audience? Just wanted to check that out really quick. Also, wanted to give a shout out to Dia, I'm gonna mess it up, Dignidad Emigrante in Athens. They are doing some organizing around affordable housing here. And if you're curious about that, there's an email, jessicamartinez2016@gmail.com, that you can contact if you would like to be involved with organizing around affordable housing here in Athens. Got to give that shout out. Dia does great work. And beautiful. Thank you so much for putting that right there. There you go, is the email. Mariah, thank you so much for giving us wonderful, thorough answers to our questions. I look forward to hearing from your colleagues that we get to talk to and see where we can find, where there might be differences and where there might be consensus and where we can be like, oh, good, here are the solutions we agree upon. So yeah, is there anything you have coming up, any events or anything you're aware of that you would like the audience to know about?
I really look so frantic as my mind scanned. What is?
Do I know anything?
What is today?
How could it be the weekend?
I'm not sure. Love working from home during the pandemic. Nothing comes to mind, but you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Mariah for Athens, or shoot me an email, or you can go to eastathens.substack.com and join my newsletter. I haven't written one in a while because I'm pregnant and I just moved into a new house and my life's been crazy, but I'm going to get back to it real soon. And so that's another place you can get updates as well.
Brilliant. And if anyone would like to keep up with the Athens area Democratic Socialists of America, you can check us out on Facebook. We are building up our chapter right now. We're not an official chapter, so if you'd like to join, we'd love to have you, and you can contact us.
Oh yeah, before we go.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a rap about DSA.
Could you?
Can I? Am I allowed? Okay.
I thought I would didn't want to ask that kind of thing, but I'm delighted.
Okay, real quick. So I am a member of DSA, full disclosure. And so I want to give a shout out to the work that the organization does. Because imagine a minute. Millions of average women and men in the tragic position of trading in passion for wages and cash, they shackled by capitalism. Imagine a minute. Millions of average citizens planting the spinach and waxing the kitchens and stacking the linens, contractors and renters and tenants, the laborer extracted for pennies. What if they coordinated to address the sordid state of it in an organization? Guess what? That's sort of what DSA does. And not even sort of, it's more of the crux. Taking the power from hoarders of bucks, big bankers offshore in their cuts, returning the power of labor to those who created. The billionaires owe it to us. So if you're jaded and surly about waking up early to earn a bag, if you're sad about Bernie, if you got a curious yearning and had it with passively lurking, we got your back and we're happy to have you. We are the DSA actively working. So yeah, thanks to DSA for having me. If you're not a member and you're watching, join. They're doing really cool stuff. So yeah.
Please do. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Mariah Parker. We will have some of Mariah's colleagues on the commission speaking with us later this week. Tomorrow we will have Carol Myers at 5 p.m. She is the commissioner for District 8. And then, let's see, we had to reschedule Friday and Saturday. So then we have Sunday, we will have Tim Denson and Melissa Link, respectively. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you again, Mariah, for everything, all the things. And yeah, y'all have a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday.